Hello friends, it's Cindy Brumbaugh from CindyLeeBDesigns.com, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Today I'd like to show you this fun little card I made using a lot of great products from the annual catalog that Stampin' Up! Has to offer. The colors on the card I used were two new ones, Granny Apple Green and the Balmy Blue, and then Old Faithful Calypso Coral. I love the way these colors intermingle with the white on the card. So let's get started with the products we're going to use. We're going to use the Botanical Bliss bundle that comes with the Botanical Bliss stamp set and the Botanical Dies Thinlits in the annual catalog. This is a really romantic, vintage, feminine, soft stamp set, but there's one image in here that kind of seems like it doesn't belong in there. It's just like clean and simple geometric design. I'm going to call it a flower and a medallion, but I do like that even though it seems like it doesn't go with all these other images, it makes this stamp set even more versatile to me because I've got this geometric design. And in the Botanical Tags Thinlits dies, there is a die that has that same geometric medallion-y flower die. So we're going to be using it on this card. So I just grab it out of there. And I used on here a nice big bold, but yet fun cursive font there, and I used the Celebrate out of the Calligraphy Essentials. I love this stamp set too with the big thank you, hello, smile, celebrate. I think you're great. I do. And so I put it on there within the Balmy Blue ink, and then I used the Amazing You dies. Now these were offered during Celebration last year, but they carried over into the annual catalog in case you forgot about that. So if you didn't get them with a purchase during Celebration last year, you can still get them in the annual catalog. So I'm using the Amazing and the You, but there's also a great word in here, Celebrate. And I did try to get this on here, but then I just thought it was a little too much die cutting. Plus I wanted to use that really neat stamped font on this card. But I do love this Celebrate here as well. So what we're going to do to get started with this card is we're going to look at the card base. It is a half of a sheet of cardstock of the Balmy Blue, and it is 8.5 by 5.5. And it's going to be scored in half at 4 1/4. Now don't worry about writing down the measurements or the colors and supplies I use because those will all be on the blog post for this card. So what we're going to do is use our Stampin' Up! Trimmer, and we're going to put the 8.5 inch side at the top, and we're going to go to 4 1/4 on the left side of this groove. And we're going to take the dark cutting blade and slide it down off of the paper so we don't accidentally use it, and we're going to use this lighter gray one, and we're just going to simply score it at 4 1/4. Leaving it still in the stamping trimmer this way. We're just going to slide over the paper so that the right side is on the right side of the groove, and we're just going to bring it over to 1 1/4. So I love the fact that you can measure small increments and cut them with the stamping trimmer. And I also love that this clear guide allows me to go into the paper, cut inside the cardstock, if that makes sense, and then not cut the edges off. But in this instance, I'm going to be using this gray cutting blade. Now, I will warn you, this is a very sharp blade, and I usually keep my finger under my clear ruler guide here so that I don't end up cutting when I'm moving it. But in this instance, I just put in a fresh blade. Oh, don't you just love it when you get a new acrylic plate for your big shot or a new blade? Oh, it was so fun to do that. However, I forgot and put my finger here. When I went to slide it, look what happened. I got a little injury. And when I was doing the other video, it bled. And so I didn't want to get you guys all worked up. So I just put this little arrow on my cutting blade, the dark one, and I put it at 1 inch on the clear ruler. And then I just drop it down, and then I'm going to cut up to the top of the trimmer. That's going to give me a 1 inch cut that comes from the edge of the paper down into the paper on the front. Now you could just go off, but sometimes the blade can get caught on the edge of the paper and you want it to be nice and clean. So I usually start inside on the paper and cut out. So then I realized that I needed to measure how I wanted to die cut out this flower medallion. And this measurement from this edge to this edge is 2 inches. Lovely. So all I needed to do was make a 2-inch gap for that to fit into when I die cut it. So I just added 2 inches to one, and I came up with 3. Yes, sometimes my math amazes me. And then I put the clear guide, the 3-inch mark, that little arrow on my dark blade, and I dropped it down again. Now this time I'm cutting down towards myself so that I also don't go up too far. So there we go. We have our cut made. Now the next thing we're going to need to do is die cut. And it's a little bit clumsy for me to bring my big shot into the picture. So we're going to pretend that great big shot is under there, and we're going to put our paper at the 5-inch side here because of course 8.5 won't fit through this way, and if you fold it you're going to cut 2 sides of your paper, so you want to have it open. So what we're going to do is take our die and we're going to put the cut side down, and we're going to put right where those that 2-inch cut mark is, we're going to line up the points of the flower, and then we're just going to put another acrylic plate on top. And I do like to use an acrylic plate that doesn't have a lot of etching on it because it's going to press down onto this here. And if you keep one plate that's just not been cut with, you won't have any etching onto your paper. So just always set one aside. And if you have to, like I do at classes, I write notes on there. I'll say, use this for silver foil so it doesn't scratch. Or this is the top one, this is the bottom one. And it's just a reminder. And so you put your acrylic plate over, run this through the big shot, and then you end up with this part that just falls off. So it just falls off. Those were the 2 cuts we made at 1 inch and then 3 inches down towards the bottom. So now we have this really fun flower medallion die cut there. So the next thing I did on this card is I wanted to figure out how to decorate the front panel of here. So I just looked at the card and I saw this is about 1 1/4 because you're putting this 1/8 inch here. It's a little bit smaller, but I like the white on both sides of the card. It came kind of like it was kind of eye-catching the way it went white, blue, white. So I just made this 1 1/4, and it also was good for the stamping here. So this white panel is 1 1/4 by 5. So 1 1/4 by 5, and then I used the Celebrate from the Calligraphy Essential stamp set, and I used Balmy Blue to stamp it. Now, just a little tutorial on these new stamp pads. Of course, they have a hinge on them, so you're not pushing them and pulling them the way your muscle wants to remember how to do that. So what you're going to do is it has a hinge, but when you open it on the hinge, you have to make sure it's completely open at 180-degree line, and then you can close it to do your stamping. But whenever you go to close it, a few gals thought, oh, it's a hinge, and then they were halfway and they tried to close it, and then it broke the ink pad right on the edges. One of them, it was a little bad, but the other one I was able to kind of press the plastic back down into something with really hard. But if you try to hinge that right now, you're going to hurt your stamp pad. So make sure when you close your these new ink pads that you're the whole way out to the edge where it actually freely moves to close it, and then you can close it. Okay, and then pop it right there. And these cute little dimples here are great for stacking those little guys. So what we did was use the Balmy Blue, and I went ahead and stamped it already because the other video I made, I messed it up, and I thought, why do I keep doing this? I'll just do it. You know how to stamp that. So you're going to stamp the Celebrate in Balmy Blue on the 1 1/4 by 5 inch, and then I bordered it with a 1 1/2 by 5 1/4. And so then what we're going to do is just use a little bit of our Tombow glue, and we're going to, I think I'm going to hide that there. And then we're just going to make sure we have a nice border of 1/8 of an inch all the way around. There we go. And then we can go ahead and put that on the front of our card. Using a little bit of Tombow once again, hoping that I don't mess this up. So, because you know with Tombow, it's permanent. It's a lot easier to lift up with snail tape runner. So there we go. We've got the beginning of our card made. Then the next thing I wanted to do is put on the Amazing in You. So what I did is I used a 2" by 4" piece of Calypso coral. You need a little bit bigger to get that fancy little G there. And I cut out Amazing with my Big Shot. And then I used a scrap of Granny Apple Green and I cut out the U. So the next thing I did is I put down the Amazing. Now when you go to put the Amazing down, you want to be able to get this piece of the G back up onto here because this isn't going to have any support. But if you glue this well, we'll just do it here so I can clean off and just put a couple little dabs. You don't necessarily want to use the adhesive sheet unless you would just use the adhesive sheet on part of the die cut, which that could be a good way of doing it. But you can go over to the N in Amazing and then a little bit on the tail of the G. Okay, so then I put the Amazing as straight as I could get it. And if that glue, just let your glue dry and then you can use your adhesive remover after it's dry. If you go to use those little adhesive removers, we don't carry them anymore, but you can find them online. If you're using these, don't try to use it while the glue is wet because it's not going to work as it's intended. You need to wait till it dries. So then I took the U and I also put some glue on the back. Okay, I'm getting to the bottom of mine. And so my girls would say, Cindy's always at the bottom of hers. So if you do have that problem, just get a little piece of scrap there, and then you can just make a little puddle and keep going back and forth. That's my little trick. Just use it as a little paintbrush there, because then you're not sitting there playing around with this and then you get a huge glob of glue. So it's better to get the blob on your scratch and then just bring it over. All right, so we got enough there. And we're going to just put that U. I lined up so that the O, you could see the whole white there. And then you can, I'm gonna lift up the Z, the loop on my Z, and put that little U under there. So there we've got Amazing You, Celebrate Amazing You. And then the other focal point is I took a little piece of scratch here and I stamped using Calypso Coral, using that flower medallion, and I stamped it on my scrap. Then I went to my Big Shot and I used the Stitched Shapes framelits, and I used the smallest circle and I die cut the circle. And then I just used my 1.5 inch punch and I punched out a Granny Apple Green circle. And then I just popped my flower medallion on a border of Granny Apple Green. And then I put some dimensionals right. I wanted to have this medallion in between the B and the T, and you know, yours might turn out a little bit different, so just whichever way, however high up you stamped, it'll all work out. So then we just put this medallion in there, and then for your eye to be able to see what's going on here, we're just going to put a little bit of glue. I'm using my glue now because I don't know where I put my Stampin' snail there, and I don't want to be running around the room. So I'm just going to put my white on the inside with a nice border equal on all the sides there. And then now I can really see what's going on here. Then I'm going to use some rhinestones, and I'm going to put a rhinestone in the middle of this Calypso Coral medallion here. I'm using a medium-sized one, and then I'm using a large one, and I'm going to put it on the inside white, but I'm going to gauge it. I'm going to close the card, put it right in there, and then I've got 1, 2, and the rule of threes says you need another one, and I'm just going to put that here on the blue, so you have that visual bling on there. So there you go. The card is completed. Oh no, let's just stick a little flower on the inside just because. So we're going to put a calypso coral flower down here on the bottom. Give a little bit of something to look at on the inside. Get that adhesive. And then you have that little stray rhinestone, but look, it's there when you close the card. So once you get that cute little flower die figured out, it's great. You just cut down 1 inch and you do that with your Stampin' trimmer. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I welcome any questions that you have. You can always email me at cindyleeb@gmail.com. You can comment on my blog, cindyleebdesigns.com. Thanks for buzzing by, friends.